Hello, everyone. First, good evening to you all there. Sorry, it's 4 a.m. here. I'm in Italy. I just got up. That's why I'm a little bit discombobulated. And it's the first session of the module. I haven't done this in 2 months. Anyway, I hope you're all well. I'm looking forward to doing this module on emptiness. So we'll start with our motivation. Meditate a little bit, generate a positive motivation, and then we'll recite the Heart Sutra, because this is a module on emptiness, and that is the Buddha's kind of heart teaching on emptiness. And then then we'll do the rest of the session. So get comfortable wherever you are seated, and start to bring your attention within, and then generate a positive motivation for the session, for this whole module on emptiness. Okay. So then, share my screen. So let's recite this Perfection of Wisdom Sutra. There's one preliminary verse that's usually recited before. I'm not sure where it comes from. And then the actual sutra. I'll recite in English. The indescribable, inconceivable, and inexpressible perfection of wisdom, unproduced, unceasing, the nature of space, object of the uniquely knowing transcendental wisdom, to the mother of the victorious ones of the 3 times I prostrate. The heart of the Perfection of Wisdom Sutra. I prostrate at the 3 noble, rare, sublime ones. Thus did I hear at one time. The Bhagawan was dwelling on Mass of Vultures Mountain in Rajgira, together with a great community of monks and a great community of Bodhisattvas. At that time, the Bhagawan was absorbed in the concentration on the categories of phenomena called profound perception. Also at that time, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara looked upon the very practice of the profound perfection of wisdom, and beheld those 5 aggregates also as empty of inherent nature. Then, through the power of Buddha, Venerable Shariputra said this to the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara: how should any son of the lineage train who wishes to practice the activity of the profound perfection of wisdom? He said that, and the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara said this to the Venerable Shariputra. Shariputra, any son of the lineage or daughter of the lineage who wishes to practice the activity of the profound perfection of wisdom should look upon it like this, correctly and repeatedly beholding those 5 aggregates also as empty of inherent nature. If form is empty, emptiness is form. Form is not other than emptiness. Emptiness is also not, form is empty, emptiness is form, emptiness is not other than form. Form is also not other than emptiness. In the same way, feeling, discrimination, compositional factors, and consciousness are empty. Shariputra, likewise, all phenomena are emptiness, without characteristic, unproduced, unceased, stainless, not without stain, not deficient, not fulfilled. Shariputra, Therefore, in emptiness, there is no form, no feeling, no discrimination, no compositional factors, no consciousness, no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no visual form, no sound, no odor, no taste, no object of touch, and no phenomena. There is no I element, and so on, up to and including no mind element and no mental consciousness element. There is no ignorance, no extinction of ignorance, and so on, up to and including no aging and death, and no extinction of aging and death. Similarly, there is no suffering, origination, cessation, and path. There is no exalted wisdom, no attainment, and also no non-attainment. Shariputra, therefore, because there is no attainment, Bodhisattvas rely on and dwell in the perfection of wisdom, the mind without obscuration and without fear. Having completely passed beyond error, they reach the end point of nirvana. All the Buddhas who dwell in the three times also manifestly completely awaken to unsurpassable, perfect, complete enlightenment in reliance on the perfection of wisdom. Therefore, the mantra of the perfection of wisdom, the mantra of great knowledge, the unsurpassed mantra, the mantra equal to the unequaled, the mantra that thoroughly pacifies all suffering, should be known as truth, since it is not false. The mantra of the perfection of wisdom is declared Tayata Gate Gate Paragate Parasam Gate Bodhi Soha. Shariputra, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva should train in the profound perfection of wisdom like that. Then the Bhagavan arose from that concentration and commended the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara, saying, well said, son of lineage. It is like that, it is like that. One should practice the profound perfection of wisdom, just as you have indicated, even as the Tathagatas rejoice. The Bhagavan having thus spoken, the Venerable Shadadvatiputra, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara, and those surrounding in their entirety, along with the world of gods, humans, asuras, and Gandharvas, were overjoyed and highly praised that spoken by the Bhagavan. Let me get to the refuge and bodhicitta verse. Right here, recite this. Maybe we'll recite in English times. I take refuge until I'm enlightened in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By my merits of listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha to benefit transmigratory beings. I take refuge until I am enlightened in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By my merits of teaching the Dharma, may I become a Buddha to benefit transmigratory beings. I take refuge until I am enlightened in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By my merits of teaching the Dharma, may I become a Buddha to benefit transmigratory beings. Okay. So that's I don't think we did last time when I did the module on death and rebirth. I don't think we did preliminary prayers much because just thought it's maybe better not to, but here especially this module is on emptiness. So it's especially good to read the Heart Sutra. I don't know, we'll see in future sessions how much time we have, maybe every session, but I mean, at least the last one again. And then, I don't remember doing refuge and bodhicitta prayer with you all before, but I just wanted to point out, maybe I know, well, it's typical at the beginning of a Buddhist session to do. You always, if you're going to practice it as a Buddhist session, not like a secular thing, then you usually take refuge, almost always take refuge in the Buddha Dharma Sangha. That's kind of one characteristic that makes any practice a Buddhist practice it's based on refuge, going for refuge in the Buddha Dharma Sangha. But this one combines the motivation of bodhicitta with refuge. So the first two lines, I take refuge until I'm enlightened. So not just take refuge for this life or for future lives or until I achieve nirvana, but until I become fully enlightened. So for however long that takes, I think I'll take refuge for that long. In the Buddha Dharma and the Supreme Assembly, means the Sangha. And then the last two lines are more related to bodhicitta. But here I wanted to point out, and I was thinking while we were saying it, because I was changing it for myself. So this is printed, the way it's printed is for the students. So by my merits, actually it's better to say by my two collections, the collections of merit and wisdom both. That's usually how we recite it in Tibetan. They replace that phrase for merits with two collections. I don't know, it's never made it into the English translation somehow. But by my two collections of, so for the students, for those, whoever's listening to the explanation, they say, list by my two collections of listening to the Dharma. But whoever's explaining in that session, then they'll say by my two collections of explaining or teaching the Dharma. So that's what I was saying, because I'm the one explaining today. So then by those merits, may I become a Buddha. So that's the bodhicitta part. May I myself become a Buddha. Why? In order to benefit all transmigratory beings. So it means all sentient beings. So maybe we'll do that more often from now on. Okay, so not that many people here today. It's good to see you all who are here. There's not that many people here. Maybe from next session. More. Yeah. I'm gonna have some. I'm gonna have some warm lemon water. Which is empty, which is not lemon water. So the Heart Sutra says, we'll come to that explanation of the Heart Sutra as part of this course. Why are there no eyes, no ears, no tongues, no body, no mind? Okay, but we'll start slowly. So we have 6 sessions. So what have we done so far? First, in the Discovering Buddhism course, we have done, did a module on the mind, and then a module on how to meditate. I did that one. And Venerable Namjong did the next module, I think on the path, the entire Lam Rim, the whole path was the 3rd. And I did the one after that on death and rebirth. That was the 4th. And then Venerable Namjong just did a module on karma. It's the 5th. So this is the 6th module on. So we've chosen to do it on the wisdom of emptiness, it's called. So actually it comes in the typical layout of the modules for Discovering Buddhism. It comes one of the last, the 12th, I think. But we decided to do it here because, well, one is because generally it's difficult. So while you're still with us, we want to just spring it on you. No, I mean, it is difficult. So more the idea is that, one idea is that if we present it earlier in the course, then there's more opportunity just to discuss it again and again and try to digest it and get our minds around it and ask questions about it. And also just for us to mention it as teachers, to mention it and explain a little bit more about it as we go on through the rest of the course. So there's more opportunity then to speak about it, which is good. And there's more, probably more opportunity, well, then for you to reflect, for the students all to reflect on it and try to meditate on it a bit more if we introduce it earlier in the course. And then another reason is because I think there's a module coming on the refuge, I believe. I don't remember clearly, but yeah, there's a module on refuge. So usually His Holiness, because refuge, well, I mean, part of the point of the module on refuge is to generate faith, right? Faith in the Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, and in their ability to protect us or free us from suffering. But it's difficult to do that if you don't understand how they protect us from suffering, or how they have the ability to protect us from suffering. And if you don't understand emptiness a little bit, there's no way you'll understand how the Buddha, Dharma, Sangha protect us from suffering. So usually when His Holiness His Holiness Dalai Lama gives advice about how to teach Dharma to people who already have like a modern education, who understand how logic and reasoning work and know how to use critical thinking, then His Holiness often advises it's better to teach first the two truths, so conventional and ultimate truths. So emptiness is ultimate truth. So His Holiness advises first, it's best to teach first the two truths, and then the Four Noble Truths, and then refuge. So, and the reason for, and the scriptural basis for that is in the Abhisamayalankara. But the reason it's good to teach first the two truths before, the Four Noble Truths and refuge, is because kind of like this, understanding emptiness and the two truths, it's merely based on logic and reason. You can, without any faith in the Buddha as a teacher or Buddhism, without, having to just take, like probably during the module on karma, you probably saw there's a lot you have to just kind of believe because that's what the Buddha said. I mean, either take it or leave it, right? Just because, well, that's what the Buddha said. So if you believe the Buddha as a teacher, then it's easy to believe a lot of things about karma. If you don't really believe, the Buddha as a teacher, you're really not sure if he's actually telling what's truth or not, then it's difficult. You can't prove. There's a lot of things taught in karma that you can't prove with logic. You can't establish. Like if you remember the four characteristics of karma, that it's certain, meaning, from every instance of happiness is a result of virtuous karma that gave rise to it. Or you can say every virtuous karma results in a result of a pleasant experience. Every non-virtuous karma results in a suffering experience. Or it's difficult to prove that for one. And then karma expands. So once you've created a karma, then the result is greater than the cause. So, and it exponentially expands every day. That one is it's impossible to prove that. Very, very difficult. But here with the two truths, though, emptiness, that things are empty of inherent existence, and the why, for the reason that they are dependently arising, that you can just use bare logic to prove. So once, and it's extremely profound teaching. So that's ultimate truth, and then conventional truth is everything that's not emptiness. It's not ultimate truth. So you can establish that there are these two kinds of truths, ultimate truth and conventional truth. And it's very profound when you start to see the world in that way. And then based on that, it's easy to understand the Four Noble Truths, why we suffer and how suffering arises, especially from ignorance, not understanding the two truths. Right? It's from kind of ignorance that doesn't understand the two truths and grasps at things wrongly. That gives rise, that's the truth of origin, and that gives rise to the truth of the path. And then once you understand that, you see how well it's possible to eliminate this kind of misunderstanding, the ignorance that gives rise to suffering. It's possible to eliminate that. So that's the truth of cessation. And then the way to do that is to train in the wisdom of emptiness, what we're going to talk about, and that's the truth of the path. So by understanding the two truths, then you can understand the four truths, the Four Noble Truths. And then based on that, then you think about, well, who's the person who taught the Four Noble Truths? It's the Buddha. And how did he teach them? He taught them by fully, generating the full understanding and realization of those himself, and then unmistakably taught to others. So there's the Buddha, the teacher. And then what did he teach? It's the Dharma. That's what we actually have to understand and practice. And then who are the community of people who, from generation to generation, devote their lives to understanding and explaining to others the Dharma after the Buddha has passed away. It's the Sangha. So then we can generate sort of a mind of refuge in the Buddha Dharma Sangha based on understanding of the Four Truths. So with that logic in mind, that for educated people, it's good to actually introduce them to emptiness first, and then the rest of the Buddha's teachings later. Then we also put this module earlier. So yeah, you might ask, well, why didn't you put it earlier on, right after? But anyway, you can ask that in the question and answer time if you want. Okay, so let's jump into the actual topic now. And I'll share, I made another PowerPoint slide for today. So I'll share that. Okay, so this is the module called The Wisdom of Emptiness, Discovering Buddhism. So it was module 6 here. And we'll do it in 6 sessions. And I'll introduce it in 6 sessions. So there's one is introduction, that's today. Then the second session will be on identifying what is to be negated versus dependent arising. So that's also, yeah. Anyway, what do we, when we say empty of what? What are we negating? Emptiness doesn't mean nothing exists. It means things don't exist in a particular way. So that's what is negated. But we'll discuss that next session. Then the session after that will be on the selflessness of persons. So it's like the emptiness of persons, and then the selflessness of phenomena. And then we'll do a session on quantum mechanics and emptiness and how they're parallel. There's many similarities, and then a summary and review session at the end. So this session, session 1, introduction. So I have 3 main headings. So this is just my outline I made up. I'm trying to base the outlines mainly on Pabonka Rinpoche's presentation in Liberation in the Palm of Your Hand, because that has the most sort of straightforward outlines, the more sort of traditional outlines, how to present emptiness. But there's not that many headings. So, but for this session, I just sort of made up my own. So the first, why study, contemplate, and meditate on emptiness, and then where's the location in the Lamrim outlines and why being presented now in DB. So the why being presented now in DB, I just explained. But so the where is emptiness fall in the Lamrim outlines. And then how to begin, kind of initial steps to take. Of course, the beginning is to take a course like this and hear someone explain, but beyond that. Okay, so first, why study, contemplate, and meditate on emptiness. So there's four subheadings I put here. First, and the most important, because it counteracts the root cause of all suffering. So I'll spend quite a lot of time on that, probably the most time on that today, because it's important to understand that how meditation on emptiness, study, reflection, understanding emptiness, it counteracts, it acts against what is the root cause of all suffering. Ignorance, which is the root of samsara. And then the second heading is that it purifies the mind, our minds, and generates wisdom, knowing reality as it is. And then third is this is how all past masters have attained both liberation, meaning freedom from the suffering of samsara, and full enlightenment. And then fourth, it's ultimately the best way to help others, right? If we want to benefit other sentient beings, ultimately, for anyone to be free from, have a lasting or irreversible freedom from suffering of samsara. So it means they've gained a state of freedom from suffering of samsara, and they'll never fall into, a state of suffering again. Then they have to realize emptiness, right? So if we want to really benefit others, we need to realize emptiness ourselves to make ourselves capable to accurately and unmistakably teach it to others. So within those, so we'll go through each of those points. So within the first, that it's important because it counteracts the root cause of all suffering. So first of all, what is the root of suffering and samsara. What is the root cause? So here I've compiled a bunch of some quotations from sutras. Generally, there are a lot of quotations from sutras about this because it's such an important issue. Because, yeah, samsara is like, I don't know, it's like a poisonous tree, or like a, like a poisonous, like thorn bush. If you just keep cutting off the branches, it keeps growing back, right? If you want to totally eliminate it, you have to identify the root. You have to find the root. And once you extricate the roots, pull out the roots, or destroy the roots, then it cannot grow again, right? It's impossible. It won't grow again. So, think of what is samsara again. It's the continuum, the continuity, or the continuum of rebirths taken repeatedly through the force of afflictive emotions and karma, in short. So samsara isn't something like, it's not like an environment that we're in and we just have to go to a different environment. It's not an external thing. Basically, it's this, it's within us. It's kind of what we're composed of. Our contaminated aggregates, we say, are samsara. So our body and our continuum of mind, which is taking rebirth, which is under the power of afflictive emotions and karma, and thereby, especially the continuum of mind that goes from life to life, and so based on that, right, the continuum of mind going from life to life is the basis of imputation. That, upon that we impute the person which takes rebirth and goes from life to life, takes rebirth in one life after another. But so now for us, those are under the power of karma and afflictive emotions, right? We can see how different experiences, different feelings, different thoughts, and different emotional kind of reactions arise largely out of our control. Now, do we have no control? No, of course. If we had no control, then there'd be no point, studying Buddhism or any other kind of spiritual path, or doing any, any kind of, I don't know, anything to try to modify like our mind and our reaction to things. We have some control, definitely, but we don't have total control, right? There's a lot of things that still arise uncontrolled, and things happen to us uncontrolled. And there's a lot of not only things that happen to us, but our minds become disturbed, right? Our minds aren't just abiding naturally in a state of peace and joy and kind of radiance like all the time, but they get disturbed. We get triggered by different things. So that's a clear indication that we're still under the control of karma and afflictive emotions. So that continuity going, and especially when we die and take rebirth, we don't have control where we take rebirth. So that's all samsara, being under the power of afflictive emotions and karma. So why is that the case? I mean, in one way, why is that the case? It's difficult to answer, but what is the cause, especially of karma and afflictive emotions, these disturbing emotions? Then this is kind of the main thing the Buddha discovered, which no one had discovered before. The main thing he taught, which no one had taught before, is that we have these disturbing emotions. The three root afflictions are ignorance, and then anger and attachment. So if we look at, but anger and attachment both arise from ignorance. If you remember when we looked at the wheel of life image, which I explained in one session, last module I taught, then at the very center are these three animals. There's a pig and a rooster and a snake. And the tail of the rooster and the snake are both in the mouth of the pig, representing that the snake represents anger. The rooster, or it's like a pigeon actually, it represents attachment. And the tail of them being in the mouth of the pig represents ignorance, represents that, anger and attachment both arise from ignorance. So if we just look at anger, anger what is it is when we observe an object of our anger, another person who's harmed us, or someone who's harmed a friend of ours, or someone, a family member, someone dear to us, or it can be an inanimate object, it can be ourselves. So we observe the object of anger, and they appear as being very unattractive. We see only the unpleasant aspects of the object, and we generate the mind wishing to harm. But so especially when we look at how the object of anger appears, they appear as being very unattractive and unpleasant. And especially it appears as if the object of our anger is unattractive, unpleasant, and somehow bad from the object's own side, right? That's not just we're imputing bad on them and then it's appearing back to me, and that's just how I perceive it. Now, that's not what we think when we're angry. We think, no, they are really bad. They exist as bad, totally independently of what I think or anyone thinks. That's just the way they are. That's a projection of ignorance, right? So in that way, it's ignorance grasping at things existing independently on their own or from their own side. So it's that's how anger arises from ignorance, is we project, first of all, just the object of anger, just the person being a person from their own side, and then on top of that, we project them being a bad person or having unattractive, unpleasant, or despicable characteristics from their own side. And we do the same in relation to ourself. We grasp at ourself existing as a real person. And then, well, in the case we're angry at ourselves, we project that we somehow, whatever negative characteristics we see about ourselves, those are really there from the side of ourself as a person. That's just how we are. It's not a dependent arising. So, and then the same with attachment, right? So when we're attached to another person, they also appear as unrealistically attractive and able to fully satisfy us and bring us pleasure. The same with attachment to objects as well. And it appears as if those characteristics exist from the side of the object. It's not just a projection of my mind, or it's not just a kind of appearance, independence upon other things. That the person or the thing we're attached to, they really truly are that way, independent of anything else. That's their essence. That's just how they are. And that's also a projection of ignorance. So basically, ignorance, so the specific kind of ignorance grasping at inherent existence. It projects this kind of appearance that things have each and everything has its own independent reality. That's how things are, this kind of objective reality. Each object has its own independent reality. And then based on that, then they have whatever characteristics we perceive, they appear as if they're actually characteristics of the object, not just projections of our mind or dependent arisings. And then based on that, we generate a very strong, exaggerated reaction to things. Some things are very good and it's great and we love it and we want to possess those things, and some things are very bad and we totally abhor and want to be separated from those things. So we generate this kind of very emotional ways. Not that emotions are bad, but this kind of distorted ways of reacting to things with attachment to some and aversion and anger to others. Then based on that, we engage in actions of body, speech, and mind, and we generate karma. And then virtuous karma and non-virtuous karma. And then based on that karma, as the karma ripens, we experience contaminated, pleasant experiences, which further lead us to generate attachment. And then we experience suffering experiences, which lead us to generate anger, displeasure. And so, so those experiences that are generated as a result of karma, they lead us to generate more afflictive emotions, which more karma. So it quickly becomes a cycle, right? So that's what the wheel of life is all about, that we looked at earlier. And anyway, we'll look at that more. But for now, because before the time runs away from me, when look at these quotations, some quotes from sutras. Sorry, I should have probably stopped sharing my screen while I was explaining that, because you've probably been looking at this quote, wondering, okay, when's he going to get to that? Okay, so here, this is from the King of Concentration Sutra, as is quoted in the great treatise on the stages of the path to enlightenment, Tsongkhapa. And it says, if you analytically discern the lack of self in phenomena, so that's like emptiness, the lack of a self in phenomena is a kind of emptiness. And if you cultivate that analysis in meditation, this will cause the result, attainment of nirvana, so freedom from samsara. There is no peace through any other means, right? So you cannot achieve freedom from samsara by any other means than, and then, thinking about emptiness and then meditating on emptiness. So that's one indication that the mind, which is the very diametrically opposed to emptiness, ignorance, grasping at inherent existence, is the root of samsara. Why? Because it's that which is a direct antidote to that mind, the meditation on self, the lack of a self in phenomena or emptiness, which, only through that can you achieve nirvana, freedom from samsara, not by any other means. And then another quotes here. So this is from, the first one here is from the Sutra Unraveling the Intended Meaning. This is another Mahayana Sutra. It says, Bhagavan, through what perfection should bodhisattvas apprehend the absence of an essence in phenomena? So again, the absence of an essence in phenomena is a synonym for emptiness. So through what perfection? So of the six perfections, of the perfection of generosity, of morality, of patience, the perfection of joyous perseverance, concentration, and wisdom. So through which of those, which perfection should bodhisattvas apprehend the absence, so apprehend the absence of an essence in phenomena or emptiness? And he says, Avalokiteshvara, they should apprehend it through the perfection of wisdom. So, emptiness should be apprehended through the perfection of wisdom. That doesn't relate to the root of samsara so much, but and then the next quote is from the Sutra Cultivating Faith in the Mahayana, again as quoted in the Lama Tsongkhapa's great treatise on the stages of the path to enlightenment. It says, I do not say that those who have faith in the Mahayana of Bodhisattvas. So remember, Mahayana means the great vehicle, the vast vehicle of Bodhisattvas. So it's the vehicle of Bodhisattvas. So Bodhisattva being a person who wants to achieve full enlightenment in order to benefit, in order to be of the greatest benefit to all sentient beings. So the path they follow, or the vehicle they sort of use to traverse the path to enlightenment, is the Mahayana. So it says, I do not say that those who have faith in the Mahayana of Bodhisattvas, unless they have wisdom, are delivered, means are delivered to freedom from suffering or to full enlightenment, no matter what Mahayana practices they may do. So no matter what other practices we do, Mahayana practices or practices of the vehicle of the hearers and solitary realizers. So no matter what other practices we do, he's saying we cannot be delivered to freedom from suffering and to full enlightenment without wisdom. So what wisdom? The wisdom mentioned here above, the perfection of wisdom, which meditates on what? The absence of an essence in phenomenon, so on emptiness. So it's only by meditating on emptiness, again, that we can achieve freedom from samsara. So here, like, no matter what Mahayana practices they may do. So we think of, well, what are all the other Mahayana practices, right? They are, think about the other six perfections: practicing generosity, practicing morality, no matter how moral we are, no matter how good we are at refraining from harming others, that alone will never free us from suffering, right? The perfection of patience, no matter how patient we are, even if we never get angry, that alone on its own, just practicing patience. And then the same with loving kindness, compassion. It's not that all those aren't important. They are incredibly important, right? To practice loving kindness, practice compassion, generate meditative concentration, joyous effort, renunciation. But like renunciation, bodhicitta, compassion, all the other practices of the Mahayana or the Pali Canon, without wisdom, realizing emptiness, realizing selflessness, none of those will ever free us from samsara. Because it's as Lama Tsongkhapa says in the three principal aspects of the path, that even you practice renunciation and bodhicitta, without realizing selflessness, you can never uproot, you can never eliminate the root of samsara. Why? Because the root of samsara is ignorance, grasping at things as being inherently existent. So you have to meditate on the direct antidote to that, to eliminate that ignorance. So that's what this module is all about. That's what the wisdom of emptiness is all about, generating that wisdom mind. So wisdom is like, hey, there's art. It's coming. Wisdom mind. Welcome, Art. It's good to see you again, although your video is not on, but welcome back. Yeah, so wisdom, analogies for wisdom are illumination. It's like light. So ignorance is like darkness. And, so it's kind of like, imagine, here the ignorance of which is the root of samsara is like darkness. And, even if you jump up and get out of bed and you make the bed and you boil and make yourself a cup of tea, and you check your phone to see what messages came in the middle of the night. None of those things eliminate darkness. You have to go over and turn the light switch on and turn the light on in the room to eliminate darkness. Nothing else will do it. So wisdom, realizing emptiness, is like light. Now, only light eliminates darkness. Nothing else you do will eliminate darkness. And so, so one symbol, one of the most main symbols of wisdom is light. So it's considered like when you offer light, like on your altar or in a temple or something, or like when you go to the Ocean of Compassion Center, if you offer a light, even when you turn on the lights in your house, it's good to think, oh, I'm offering light to all the Buddhas, just when you turn on the lights. But if you offer, a candle or an oil lamp or something, that's considered creating a cause for generating wisdom, realizing emptiness, to offer light to the Buddha. So, strong symbol of wisdom. Another symbol of wisdom is the sword, because the sword cuts through things. So here again, the analogy is like ignorance is like a poisonous tree, or the roots of a poisonous tree, and then you cut through that with the sword of wisdom, thereby eliminating it. So let me share my screen again. So as I was saying, as Tsongkhapa says in the three principal aspects of the path, even if you meditate on bodhicitta and renunciation, without cutting through the root of samsara, or eliminating the root of samsara, you can never be free from it. Therefore, you have to meditate on, he says, dependent arising there. The reason for that is because dependent arising is the main sign, the valid sign, or the main reason establishing that things are empty of inherent existence. And we'll come back to that. So the next quote here I want to speak about, if I keep track of my time. Okay, because we're going to pause. So, is Venerable Bhikshus. We went over this one actually already in relation to the Wheel of Life. Venerable Bhikshus, whoever sees dependent and relative origination sees the Dharma. So here, seeing the Dharma is actually realizing emptiness, because the Dharma here is like the essence of what Buddha taught, the ultimate truth of what Buddha taught, which is emptiness. So he says, whoever sees the dependent and relative origination sees the Dharma. So that's what Tsongkhapa is saying in the three principal aspects of the path. To cut the root of samsara, you need to meditate on dependent origination. Why? Because that's the entryway, that's the gateway to see emptiness. We'll come back to that, but here the Buddha says that again in the sutra, the rice ceiling sutra. It's because things are dependently originated or interdependently arising that they're empty. You know? So as Buddha says, Venerable Bhikshus, whoever sees dependent and relative origination sees the Dharma. Whoever sees the Dharma sees the Buddha. What is this dependent and relative origination of which I speak? It is this. Because this exists, that arises. So because one thing exists, therefore another thing arises. So because one thing exists, then other things exist. Things exist in dependence upon each other. Because this is born, that is born. So it's quite simple, actually. I mean, that's not that complicated. And emptiness is not, I mean, sometimes there's just mystique around emptiness, like, oh, emptiness is so difficult, you know, it's the intractable, you know, complex, impossible to understand thing of Buddhism. But sometimes it's kind of like we make that story up, sometimes to impress other people, or sometimes to excuse our own laziness, or just, I don't know. Sometimes there's a kind of a trip around emptiness. In one way, though, it's not that difficult, you know. I mean, I used to feel, but I mean, it's largely it's due to our karma, like how we find it. If we find it kind of easy to understand or not. I found it very difficult to understand for years and years. So here I am saying it's not that difficult. Maybe that's because I've spent years and years studying this, and now I find it not that difficult. But in one way, I think, yeah, there is a bit of mystique about it, so that it's easy to think. I think a lot of times, I think we think to ourselves we don't really understand it, when actually we kind of do understand a lot more than we actually give ourselves credit for. So when you look at a quotation like this, I mean, this is where I'm just digressing from, is that, you know, because this exists, that arises. That's not that difficult to understand, you know. It's because you put, you know, you plant, you know, crops in a field, then, you know, plants arise, you know, because you put the water on the, you know, put water in a pot and set it on the stove and light the flame, then it gets hot. Like, that's not that complicated, right? So that one thing arises in dependence upon another, you know, because we breathe in and out, that then oxygen goes into our blood, and then it oxygenates the rest of our body, and we don't die. Like we keep surviving from moment to moment. Because we, you know, we get hungry, then we eat, and then we feel full. Like, okay, it's not that complicated in some way. So, but that's why, I mean, thinking about those kind of things, dependent arising, and we'll come back to this at the end, which is where I should be right now, actually, which is a long ways away, the end of these outlines. But that's how to begin thinking about emptiness. It's thinking about dependent arising and independent arising in all different ways, in all different examples of it. Okay, so now let's go on. So I've already covered this, thankfully. So why is it important, again, to think about emptiness? Because it's the root of samsara. How is the root of samsara? So let's go backwards. We experience suffering now. Why? Because we're experiencing the result of karma. Why do we have karma, and why does that karma ripen? Because we have afflictive emotions like anger and attachment. Remember how I was saying how I started with anger and attachment as examples of afflictive emotions, but there's countless others, you know, jealousy, arrogant pride, depression, you know, low self-esteem, so forth. So, but those, because we have afflictive emotions, then we engage in contaminated actions, which is karma. Then when the seeds of those, the imprints created by those actions, or the seeds created by those actions, they ripen in suffering. So, yeah, and then we, as a result of karma, we experience suffering. So the suffering comes from karma. karma that comes from afflictive emotions. And those afflictive emotions arise because of inaccurate concepts. So here, what we mean by inaccurate concepts is when I was saying, how does anger perceive its object? It perceives the object as being, inherently possessing negative aspects, unattractive, negative, detestable characteristics. So when we're angry at, think about someone you're angry at, to bring it back to reality, right? Think about an instance you're angry, irritated with someone. And it seems like, the way they're acting, the way they're appearing, what they're doing is detestable or unattractive, unpleasant, totally unlikable from the side of the object, from its own side. So that is an inaccurate concept when we perceive the person or another object as existing, independently from their own side. And then in the case of anger, beyond that, we think they're unattractive, unpleasant from their own side. Or in the case of attachment, first the object itself exists from its own side, and then its characteristics of being attractive and able to please us exist from the side of the object. So first we have that kind of inaccurate concept. On the basis of that, we generate the afflictive emotion. In the case of anger, wanting to harm or wanting to retaliate. In the case of attachment, wanting to possess, right? So from the inaccurate concepts come afflictive emotions, from those come karma, so that comes suffering. And that all comes from ignorance. This fundamental ignorance of grasping at things, ourselves and other things, as existing from their own side. So what does that mean to exist from their own side? We'll go into that in more and more detail. But so that's kind of one of our main jobs, especially the next session actually, is to unpack, like, when we talk about this kind of ignorance, what exactly are we talking about? But for now, just get some vague ideas. Okay. So here Nagarjuna explains all this in this verse. His Holiness Dalai Lama quotes, like almost every time he teaches these days, he quotes this verse. Because by exhausting karma and afflictive emotions, one is liberated. So liberated from samsara. So how is one freed from samsara? By exhausting, bringing to an end karma and afflictive emotions, right? By eliminating afflictive emotions, and thereby, actually, when we eliminate afflictive emotions, we still have the seeds of karma in our mind stream, but they can no longer ripen any further. Just like seeds cannot produce sprouts without moisture. So the afflictive emotions, on one hand, they cause us to engage in karmic actions and give rise to create karma. But on the other hand, the afflictive emotions also serve as like the moisture which causes the seeds of karma that we've accumulated in the past to ripen. So that's explained best in the 12 links of dependent arising. But by exhausting karma and afflictive emotions, one is liberated. And then where do karma and afflictive emotions come from? Karma and afflictive emotions come from false conceptions. So here, false conceptions means these kind of inaccurate concepts. It's exaggerated. We exaggerate, that things as being unpleasant or pleasant, and then being that way from their own side. So karma and afflictive emotions come from these false conceptions. Those come from elaboration of inherent existence. So elaboration here is a synonym for ignorance, grasping at inherent existence. So why do they use elaboration? This here, elaboration means not that like we explain something in more detail, but it has more the sense of like we project something onto another thing. I'm not sure why they use tropa in Tibetan. It's kind of more like it has a sense of like you cover something over with another thing. I'm not sure why they use elaborate. I mean, I know why they use, because the Tibetan also has that connotation, but it's it's more like, I'm not sure we use it. I'm trying to think of a way we use elaborate in English in the same way it kind of is supposed to mean here. But I can't think of an example. Maybe, I don't know. Can you I don't know, maybe can you, if one of you all can think of, could you say, but like where we elaborate something here, it's kind of like, so the idea is that ignorance, it projects this kind of false appearance onto reality that is not actually there, right? So it's kind of like you cover over, almost like putting a costume on a child, or disguising something so that, if you have something in a room, like, I don't know, like a surprise gift for someone on their birthday, and you don't want them to see it, and you cover it over with a cloth so that they won't think anything's there, right? So that they won't be able to see it. So it's kind of like that, like reality, there's a reality there, but we can't see reality as it is because it's covered over with this projection by ignorance. So the cloth, so reality is like the gift in my analogy, and then ignorance is like the cloth covering over it so that it can't be seen. So it's that kind of, but we don't use elaboration. I mean, maybe elaboration is almost like a decoration put on something. So it's like, it's not the actual thing. It's kind of like you think like henna. I don't know if you know about henna. Women in India, women put henna over their hands. So it's almost like that. It's kind of elaborated on, decorated, but it's not actually part of the hand. It's just something put on it so that you can't see the thing as it is. It's kind of that idea. Anyway, we don't spend too much time on it. So, but the main thing is, this means ignorance, the elaboration or ignorance of inherent existence, grasping at inherent existence. As for elaboration, it is ceased by emptiness. So it means by realizing emptiness, we eliminate that elaboration, that ignorance, which gives rise to afflictive emotions and karma, right? So this is another, Nagarjuna is establishing that this is, ignorance is the root of samsara, and the way to eliminate that is by meditating on emptiness. And here, this last line, it can be read, His Holiness always explains that his teacher, Kunu Lama Tenzin Gyaltsen, I believe, he explained, he was a Sanskrit scholar, and he explained that the way this reads in Sanskrit, because remember, this is from, Nagarjuna composed in Sanskrit, that this last line can either read, it is ceased by emptiness, which refers to the wisdom realizing emptiness, ceases elaboration. So that refers to, of the Four Noble Truths, the truth of the path. Because remember, the path is wisdom meditating on emptiness. But this line can also read, it is ceased in emptiness, which means in the sphere of emptiness, there is no actual ignorance of inherent existence. I mean, in the sphere of emptiness, there is no inherent existence. There is no elaboration. So that would refer more to the truth of cessation. So it can refer to either of the two truths. Anyway, that's not so important. So how does one mind counteract another? Let me see what's coming here. Okay, we're pretty close to the end, actually. So how does one mind counteract the other? Okay, so here I'll just mention this quickly, and then we can maybe discuss more later on. But it's like hot and cold. Like if you have, say, hot air, well, let's say cold air. Usually it's the cold air we want to get rid of. If you have cold air in a room, then how do you eliminate it? You put hot air into the room, right? So imagine like a body of hot air and a body of cold air. They can't both exist in the same place at the same time. So the more hot air you put, the cold air, it dissipates, right? It goes away. Actually, it's like the hot air, the cold air probably becomes warmed up. But if you put more cold air into the room, then the hot dissipates, right? So they counteract each other. So wisdom, and on the one hand, like ignorance and wisdom are like that. They're diametrically opposed to each other, right? So when you generate wisdom, it reduces the kind of habituation to ignorance. If you stop generating wisdom and you just remain habituated to ignorance, then it reduces the wisdom. So they're diametrically opposed to each other. And then again, like light, like illumination and darkness, when you, so here it can be like when you suddenly come to know something like as true, something that is true, you come to know it as true. It's like illumination that eliminates some kind of doubt and unknowing with relation to that. I always find the example of like math, understanding mathematical equations really good here, because I remember, when I was back in grade school or high school, especially like algebra, geometry, remember you get some kind of, equation, and at first you look at it and it just doesn't make sense. You don't understand like what the symbols mean, how it works, but the teacher explains, and then you do a few, the kind of building block equations, like some arithmetic, some subtraction and division, and then you play with the equation, and it suddenly at some point it like makes sense. It's like, oh, this is how it works. It's like this. If you put this number here, then you get this result, and then you can replace that X or Y with any number, and it comes out, with the same. It's kind of this formula for how these numbers work together in this pattern. And then it makes sense. So after it makes sense, then it's like this unknowing, you have this, ignorance. First, there's confusion, doubt, there's no clarity. You don't see, how it works. And then suddenly you understand it and it works, and you eliminate that doubt. And that unclarity is not there anymore. I mean, also maybe like, I don't know, you can think of a lot of other examples, like cooking, some kind of food, like a recipe, how a recipe works, how to make a certain kind of food, so it clicks, or how to fix something, like, I don't know, like how to adjust your watch. I remember actually my watch, when I first bought it, I didn't understand how to adjust like the time and date. The minute hand is easy, the hour hand not too difficult, but then the time and date, like, but there's a certain, you have to pull this little button out just the right distance, and then it'll adjust the time and date. Otherwise, no. So there's all kind of things we can see we don't understand, but then we fiddle around with, we play with, we try different things, and then suddenly we come to a point where we understand, and then it's that darkness is eliminated. So also it's like that. And then love and anger. Here it's more like there are two different states of mind which are diametrically opposed. I mean, check in your own experience. Can you be angry at someone and be, well, so here it's a little tricky. You can be in love with someone at the same time. That doesn't really work, right? Because yes, you can be in love with someone. That's because in love with someone is more like a statement about generally how you feel towards them over a long period of time. But here, for this to work, we need to have like the mind of love, which means wanting them to be happy. I don't know, actually, it's not so obvious that it means wanting them to be happy in that moment. So can you be both angry at someone and want them to be happy at the same moment, right? The classical answer of Buddhism is always no, like, because the mind of love observes its object, sees it as attractive or pleasant, and has a mind wishing it to be well, wishing it to be happy. Whereas the mind of anger observes an object and wishes to harm, right? Sees it as unattractive and wishes to harm. So you can't have, if you just reduce it to the wish to be, well and happy, and the wish to harm, obviously you can't have those two minds towards the same object at the same time. Well, you have to check. I mean, these are things we need to check in our own experience. Is it true or not? But the idea here is that, it's just stated below. One mind cannot apprehend the same object in two different and mutually opposed ways at the same time. Well, in general, in two different mutually opposed ways, it's not at the same time. So one mind, so think about this, one mind, when we observe an object, one mind observes an object. So eye, consciousness, ear, nose. Actually, we're not talking about the sense consciousness, we're talking about mental consciousness. So in a mental consciousness, when we think about an object, basically the idea is that we can't think about that object or feel towards that object in two diametrically opposed ways at the same time. One mind only observes an object in one way. So if we have, so the idea here is like, stick with love. If we have an affectionate, loving mind towards an object, we can't at the same time, have anger towards, like wanting to harm, or have arrogance towards. It's like, like a loving, like the mind of love cannot also be arrogant pride, or cannot also be jealousy. There's different ways of, because there are different ways of engaging an object. So one mind only engages an object basically in one way, right? There are some that are there's some that don't do to go together, because feelings become difficult. So like if we have mind wishing for someone to be well, like observing a person, wishing them to be well, there can also be a pleasant feeling that goes along with that, right? There's a accompanying feeling, and that's a slightly different way of engaging. It's not really a way of engaging the object, though. It's more like a kind of feeling is difficult. Yeah, feeling is it's kind of its own thing. It's a little different. But well, like this. I mean, if we just look at good and bad, you can't observe this. Can you observe the same object and think that it is both good and it's bad at the same time? Right? We have to check. So the idea here is that one mind cannot apprehend the same object in two different mutually opposed ways. Right? One mind either thinks the object is good, or if it thinks it's bad, it's a different mind. It's the mind that apprehends the object as bad. If it thinks it's good, it thinks it's good. If it thinks it's just average, that's also different, right? But one mind can't both think the same object is good and bad and average all at the same time, right? Those would be different minds. So then the next one, two minds. Two minds. Okay. Right. Two minds apprehending or engaging the same object in mutually opposed ways cannot abide manifestly in the same person's continuum at the same time. Okay, so this is a little bit of an elaboration on that before. The idea here is that I like embellish. Yeah, embellish is good. Or I just saw that. Yeah, for elaboration, embellish is a good synonym from before. But here, so the idea here is that not only can one mind not both, apprehend its object as good and as bad at the same time. It can only be one or the other. But at the time we have in our continuum as a person, so as a person in our continuum, at the very moment, the precise moment. So here we have to look at very infinitesimal moments, right? Because different minds arise very, very quickly in our mind stream. We can very switch from one thought to another incredibly quickly, right? But so in the very moment that we're observing an object and, for example, thinking it's good, in that moment we cannot also think it's bad. Right. In the very next moment, we might switch to think, oh, but this is bad. Like, oh, but this is good. Oh, but that's bad. We can switch very quickly. But in the very moment that we're thinking, oh, this is good, in that very moment, there cannot also be manifestly in our mind. Right. So dormant is a whole other issue. There are many subconscious things that are going on. Right. But manifestly, we cannot also think this is good at the exact same time. Right. And that's not only, so good and bad is just an example. Again, having, affection towards, wishing for something, someone to be happy, and then wishing to harm them. They cannot both exist exactly at the same time. Right. And then, but here in relation to emptiness, wisdom of emptiness and ignorance is, so these relate in that at the very moment we have, the wisdom realizing emptiness, at that moment, we cannot also have ignorance manifest in the mind at the same time, grasping an inherent existence. So there is a lot of, there's a lot of debate about this, and some more subtlety to add. But generally, the idea is that. So the goal in in Buddhism largely is to become so habituated to, so familiarized with the wisdom realizing emptiness and realizing dependent arising, realizing ultimate truth, realizing reality as it is, that we continually realize that all the time. We're fully habituated to that, so that we're continually abide in a realization of the way things are. And so there's no opportunity for ignorance ever to arise, right? Now it's like we're the opposite. Ignorance is continually arising, and we almost never have, we never have wisdom realizing emptiness, which is why it's so difficult. That's why it's really difficult to realize, not because in and of itself it's something incredibly complicated, but because we have no habituation to it whatsoever, right? It's completely new. It's like trying to, explain to a fish what it's like to walk on dry land. It's not that, walking on dry land is not that big of a deal. It's not that complicated, right? We do it all, humans, we do all the time. But for a fish who's, always lived in the ocean, it's like incomprehensible, right? So that's kind of why it's difficult to realize emptiness, because we have no familiarity with it. All right, I'm gonna have to, I can leave. I'll just skip through. I'll go through, well, I probably shouldn't, but I'll go through the rest of the points for this, and then I'll leave the rest for next session, because we can do that. Okay, so these are just small points to finish off this first heading, which was why is it important to meditate on emptiness? So another one is just it purifies the mind and generates wisdom, knowing reality as it is. So now, our minds are just full of kind of obscuration and sort of darkness and haziness, because we're so habituated to ignorance from beginningless lives. So, why is it a Buddha's mind is so pure that they can be omniscient, they know all things? Because they've realized emptiness. So, realizing reality as it is, it purifies the mind. It purifies. Just like, a good analogy for this is getting to know another person better. Sometimes when we newly know a person, we jump to a lot of false conclusions about them. We make a lot of judgments, and we don't really realize what's going on with them. And then as we come to know more about the person and their history and their life, we generate a much more accurate, perception, awareness of what's going on with them, and that eliminates a lot of wrong ideas related to them. So in general, it purifies the mind and generates wisdom, knowing reality as it is. Then another point is that, well, this is how all the past masters have attained liberation and enlightenment. So from Buddha, Shakyamuni Buddha on down to now, everyone, whether practicing in the Pali tradition or the Sanskrit tradition, whether in Burma, Thailand, Sri Lanka, Tibet, China, anyone who's achieved liberation from samsara, they've all realized emptiness. There's no other way for enlightenment, of course. So, and then the fourth is ultimately the best way to help others. So I already mentioned this. If you really want to help others to be ultimately free from suffering, there's a lot of temporary ways to help. Just learning, teaching someone how to do breathing meditation and mindfulness meditation can be very helpful to reduce anxiety, reduce stress, to help just be more calm, more in touch with oneself. There's a lot of benefits to all, many other aspects of the Buddhist teaching that can be but they're all of temporary benefit. None of those can lead to an everlasting peace or happiness. Only wisdom of emptiness can do that. Okay, so we'll stop there today, and then we'll pick up from here next time. And let's take a 5-minute break. Or, yeah, we'll take a 5-minute break now. And then come back and then do a little bit of meditation and then question and answer, I think. Yeah. Okay, so 5-minute break. Okay, so let's do a little meditation first. We'll just do quite short, maybe 10 minutes. Um, so we want to we want to meditate to get start to generate a sense. Well, look at dependent arising, right? We want to get a sense of dependent arising. So dependent arising, basically means just looking at how things. There's different ways to look at it. One is we'll mainly focus on how things on causes and conditions, right? There's mainly three different kinds of dependent arising: dependence upon how things are dependent upon their causes and the conditions which give rise to them. And then another is dependence upon different parts. So especially when we look at consciousness, there's different ways to look at parts, like a physical thing, like your laptop in front of you. It has a keyboard and then the case and then the motherboard and processor and the chip and all different parts. So physical things are made of parts, molecules, atoms. But in terms of consciousness, which is not physical, when we speak about parts of consciousness, we usually mean the different moments in time that strung together make up a continuum of consciousness. And then so there's parts. So things exist in dependence upon cause and conditions, and in dependence upon parts, and then in dependence upon naming or mental imputation, thinking this is this, right? But that one's more complicated. We'll come back to. For now, if we can, for this meditation session, if we can mainly just get some sense of how there's dependence upon causes and conditions, and then maybe moments in time. So let's look at, we'll take as our main object our own minds. And then I'll pose different questions. But first, just try to begin to focus on your mind, and just observe your own mind. And so generate the determination for the next, say, 10 minutes. Focus on my mind and let go of all other objects. So the first question to reflect on is your mind changing moment to moment? And if so, how? And another related question would be, is there any aspect of our mind which is not changing from moment to moment? So you can reflect on those questions. Is one's own mind? You can ask yourself, is my mind changing moment to moment? If so, how? Is there any aspect of my mind, a part of my mind, any instance of my mind that's not changing moment to moment? So take a few minutes, reflect on that. Try to get a sense of how the mind is impermanent. Mhm. So we're focusing on our minds, and then contemplating different questions with relation to our minds. So another question or kind of set of questions is, where does our mind come from? So not our whole mind, but instances of mind. So as we observe our mind in the present moment, looking at whatever perceptions, thoughts, feelings arise, then ask oneself, where do they arise from? And you can also ask, do they arise from causes and conditions? And if so, what causes and conditions do they arise from? Mm. So reflect on that for a few minutes. Where are our different minds arising from? Different instances of awareness, perception, feelings, thoughts. Where do they arise from? Where do they go? Do they arise from causes and conditions? If so, what causes and conditions give rise to each moment of awareness? And then finally, is there any aspect of, so can reflect on this, is there any aspect of one's mind, or you can also add one's body or any part of one as a person. Is there any aspect of one's mind or one's body or oneself as a person that is not produced by causes and conditions, that does not arise from causes and conditions? So think about how you would answer that question. What's the case with regard to that for a few minutes? Mhm. Okay, stop there. So just yeah, before so we'll do question and answer now. If you have some questions. But so this is but for homework, I'm just giving you meditation homework assignment. So for homework, I'll ask Mary Ellen to send out this set of questions. But so we can begin, I mean, the kind of place to begin meditating on emptiness is thinking about dependent arising. So I've just put together a list of questions here to think about, like, how do we exist as a person? Do we exist, independence upon causes and conditions or parts or not? When do we begin? When do we end? And so forth. And then look at how we perceive yourself in different moods. Like when we're feeling defensive, how do we appear to exist? When we're inspired, when we're jealous or afraid. Um, so if you can reflect on those things during the week when you're meditating, that would be good. But generally, you can just take what we just did and kind of expand on that and do that in different ways. That'd be fine. Okay, so now if there's any questions, we have about 15 minutes left.
Mary?
So we talked about, just to review, what did we talked about? Why it's important to meditate on emptiness was the main thing. Why we're discussing it now, and how it's the root cause of samsara.
Mary
Okay.
got raised.
Right, yeah. Jorge?
Thoughts and what you think a result of your karma?
What? Can you repeat?
Thoughts and what you think, your stream of consciousness that you think, is that a result of your karma?
Yeah, what you think? In general, I mean, many, well, it's mixed, right? There's some, well, it's kind of complicated question. Is it a result of our karma? Yes and no, right? Because we do, like, we can, like, volitionally just decide, I'm going to think about this or I'm going to think about that. In which case, that's not directly, I mean, it's indirectly a result of karma. Like, for example, I mean, the whole fact that we're a human being now is a result of karma. So then everything we do as a human being is, in some degree, it's, we're doing that because we're a human. We're not like an animal or a deva or something. So it's everything we do as a human is, in some degree, it's indirectly a result of the karma that caused us to take rebirth as a human, for example. But then that doesn't mean that everything's predetermined and we can't decide what to do. We still have free will and we can decide to do this or that. But even that, like the options that appear to our mind, like, well, maybe I'll do this or maybe I'll do that. Why did those options and not something completely different appear is related to karma also. So it's very complex, way. There's some definitely among the thoughts that arise in our mind, definitely is part. I mean, some of them are exclusively like karma, like when we react to, especially you can see when we involuntarily thoughts or reactions like emotions arise completely involuntarily. That's really primarily due to karma, right? But then when we meditate on, loving kindness and we truly try to generate this kind of attitude of compassion or loving kindness, that's more due to our own effort. No, that's not so much due to karma. But then it's related to our karma of, we have the karma to be interested in, meditating at all, that's also kind of karma. So it's very mixed. Yeah. That's right. I think Jorge had a question. You had your hand up earlier. Jorge, you still have a question?
Yes, good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone else. So I understand the ultimate goal is emptiness, or one of the ultimate goals is emptiness. And I guess, does that mean like at the end of the day, in order to obtain emptiness, I had to end up, and this is an extreme example, end up leaving my wife and kids just to be alone, like just to understand emptiness, or can I have like all these? Because I know this is an extreme case. I'm not sure if you need to be alone by yourself, empty. Yeah, that's my question.
Okay. No, good question. No, you don't have to leave your wife and kids and everything else and your house and your food. No. So, well, first of all, just to clarify, emptiness is an object, like something we realize. So what we're striving for is not like to be empty, but rather to understand emptiness. We want to generate the wisdom which understands emptiness. So we're just trying to generate that understanding. Now, of course, just like when we think about anything, yeah, it's helpful to not have like a bunch of screaming kids around, or have your wife telling you need to go be shopping, or I don't know, go out and do some errand, or fix the toilet or something at the same time. Like, we need space to think. But that doesn't mean we have to totally abandon like our kids or our partner or whatever. No, I mean, just like any meditation, you can, yeah, you need to be alone for periods, but that doesn't mean for your whole life. And so meditation, emptiness is the same. It does help to have a little space to think about it once in a while. I mean, you need that, but that doesn't mean you have to completely abandon everybody and go off, live all on your own.
Okay, thank you. Because I thought it was because I have this attachment to these either people or objects. I won't be able to understand the idea of emptiness.
Well, even you can understand emptiness even with some degree of attachment, but even giving up attachment, it doesn't mean giving up the things. It means changing the way you relate to them in your mind. Right? Giving up attachment doesn't mean, like you want to give up attachment to chocolate. It doesn't mean you have to stop eating chocolate. It means the way you relate to it is different. You don't expect it to, you don't heap an unrealistic expectation that it's going to please you on it, right? You can still enjoy something without having this totally unrealistic expectation that it's going to please you, such that when you're without it, you're miserable, right? I mean, the real test of when you have attachment to something or not is if you can not get it, like especially when you expect you're going to get it and then you don't. How does it make you feel? Right? If it makes you really upset, you're attached to it. If it's totally fine, and it really doesn't matter that much one way or the other, then you're not very attached to it. So just like attachment, it doesn't mean giving up things literally. It just means changing the way you relate to them. Also, emptiness, to meditate on emptiness, it doesn't mean you have to, literally make your life empty of everything, like not have everything. It's completely different.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate the answer.
Another question or comment? We can make this like a discussion group. Yeah, Dana.
So as I was listening to your talk, I keep thinking about what is it going to be like realizing emptiness. So for instance, I love Haagen-Dazs cherry vanilla ice cream. It's like the most amazing thing ever. Breakfast, lunch, and dinner, right? So if I now realize emptiness, what happens to that ice cream? I mean, what happens to how I think about it? Am I still gonna like it? Will I like all the other ones the same as I like cherry vanilla ice cream? I mean, that just kept coming up for me today.
Yeah. No, it's a good question. Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. If we realize emptiness, how does it change our experience of things, our perception of things? Well, one is that basically it'll be much nicer. You'll experience the ice cream, it'll be much more pleasant than before. because one is there won't be this, now when you experience the ice cream, there's a sense of like there's me and then there's the ice cream out there. And so one is there'll be a sense of like more interrelatedness, like that, and there's probably a feeling, I don't know you personally, but most of us when we enjoy things, there's a feeling um like like my enjoyment depends on this object. So like with ice cream, say I'm here and I'm not without the ice cream, I don't really taste anything nice. You know, I don't have kind of a good experience. I just kind of have a neutral or like nothing experience. But then when I have this Haagen-Dazs ice cream, then I have a really nice experience. And that totally depends on the ice cream. Right. So we have the sense of like the really pleasant experience, it comes from the ice cream. Like I'm devoid of that. But if you realize emptiness, just as a small example, is like, then there's a feeling like there's no actual, the me and the ice cream are not separate, you know? Like, so actually I'm, you know, I'm intimately interconnected with the ice cream. So that when I enjoy it, the enjoyment is coming as much from me as it is from the ice cream, which is very rewarding kind of thing, you know, to feel. So what the view of attachment, where we feel like the ice cream is delicious and I don't have any cause of deliciousness, I'm just like plain. It's a kind of a low self-esteem. It's a kind of like deprecation of ourself and our ability to give pleasure to ourselves or to anybody. No, we very much feel like it's the object out there. And this is, I mean, a lot in the West, we have this really strongly because of advertising. I mean, almost all advertising is trying to convince us to buy something. So it's trying to convince us that our pleasure can come from this thing that we can buy, which is, you know, totally wrong view. But that's what, you know, sales, to sell stuff, it kind of depends on that. I mean, if not, it's not, of course there are things. I mean, I know I'm glancing at Art. I know Art told me he sells vehicles. And I'm thinking, well, what's Art thinking? Like, you know, it's true. If we don't have a vehicle, we can't drive from point A to B. We can't just like get from point A to B without things. So objects do give us things that we can't have otherwise, right? So we do need to buy them, but it's more more fundamentally the sense of being satisfied doesn't depend on external objects. We can have satisfaction from within, right, without external things. I mean, partly, right? There's always some caveats, but so when we, you know, but to go back to your question though, so when we experience the ice cream, realizing that it's empty of inherent existence, what does that mean? It means, so instead of thinking about emptiness here at the beginning, think more about dependent arising, right? The flip side. They're like two sides of the same coin, emptiness and dependent arising. So if you think about the ice cream as a dependent arising deeply, what does that mean? When you're enjoying the ice cream, you're also realizing this ice cream, it didn't just like suddenly out of thin air pop up in the grocery store shelf, right? It's part of a whole process, an infinite process, which, you know, where there's cows giving milk. Where did the milk come from? Where did the cows come from? They came from their parents, their parent cows. Where did they came from? You know, you can trace. So here, the whole story of Darwinian evolution, back to the earliest living organisms on Earth, back to the whole Big Bang. And then the food that they ate, where did that come from? From the grass, it came from the ground, from the nutrients in the soil, and the sun, and the sunlight shining on it. So and then the people who, you know, took the ice cream and then combined it with sugar. It's like, oh my God, it's the revolution, you know, sugar and milk together. You know, who thought of that? And then not only that, and then cherries, the flavor. Where did the cherries come from? They came from these beautiful cherry trees which blossom in spring. So when you think about the ice cream independent, and then how did you meet that? You know, think about, you know, how did you discover that? And then you were able to buy that. Where did that money came from? You know, that came from because you had work and because other people are paying you to do something, or, and where did that wealth come from? And the whole system of money, and then stores. Think about 1,000 years ago, people didn't have stores. They had to go out in the forest and just find like roots and herbs and stuff. So all of that becomes part of the story of one, bite of ice cream. So it becomes so much more amazing than just like me eating ice cream. It's like this, when you think about the interdependent arisingness of it, it's like it's not just like this isolated event. There's me and ice cream and I'm eating it. These, not this disparate, isolated events, but it's like any event is interconnected infinitely with all the rest of the universe. So it's kind of a wondrous event. So I think every event is kind of a wondrous experience like that. I mean, I haven't realized emptiness, right? But I've studied it, and thought about it a lot. At least, yeah. So I have kind of a better sense of what it must be like, I think, maybe. So I think it's something like that, you experience everything as intimately interconnected, and that's a much more rich experience than experiencing things as disparate and isolated from each other. Any comments or questions? Let's have 5 minutes left. I'm going to ask you guys a question if you don't ask me one. All right. So another topic I was supposed to cover today, where is it covered in the Lam Rim? Right. You did the third, module? The third module on the Lam Rim, on the path, the whole structure of the path. So can you remember, where does emptiness, or wisdom of emptiness, where does it come up, or where is it presented? It's in two different places. I'll give you a hint already in the Lam Rim. Can you remember? Well, let's go scope by scope. Think about the small scope. Right. So remember, the Lam Rim is divided into 3 scopes, right? There's the small scope, the middle scope, the great scope. Right. So what are the topics of the small scope? You gotta unmute yourselves for this. And Mary Ellen, don't answer right away. Yeah, probably the most studied student here, I think. What do you remember of the topic? Yeah, just speak up.
A human rebirth. Is
human rebirth. Yeah. And then what happens after you die? Sorry, I gave it away. After you're born, you die, yeah. So there's death, impermanence and death. And then where do you go when you die?
Lower realms.
Well, there's a suffering of the lower realms there. Hopefully we don't go there, but it's possible. And then what can save you from that? Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, right? And then how do they save you from that? This may be the more difficult one. How do the Buddha Dharma save us? The other topic is what you just studied in the last module. What did you study in the last module?
Oh, virtuous karma.
Karma, yeah. Well, it's virtuous karma. Yeah, well, it's more like the idea is the understanding how karma works. Having that wisdom of understanding how karma works can save us from the lower realms, because we realize, oh, I better stop creating negative karma and create positive karma instead. So yeah, so there's no emptiness there, right? That's the in the lower scope, small scope, I should say, the small scope, there's no emptiness. What are the topics of the middle scope? Yeah. Or anything.
I think middle scope is about suffering, 8 kind of suffering, and then 12 independent link.
Yeah, definitely. The 8 kinds of suffering. Then there's also 6 kinds of suffering, 3 kinds of suffering.
Yeah.
So the sufferings of all of samsara.
Yes.
And then the dependent arising, the 12 links of dependent arising.
Yes.
Mhm. Yeah, it's a little the headings in the middle scope are not so clear as the small scope, but there's also like the afflictive emotions. They're described like anger and attachment, because how does suffering arise? I think the cause of suffering. The second, so the 8 sufferings you mentioned, they're the truth of suffering, and then there's the truth of the origin, or the truth of the cause of suffering, and in that is presented the afflictive emotions, and then how we die and take rebirth. There's a description of that, and then as part of that, there's a description of the 12 links of dependent arising. But then there's also a description of how we can get free from samsara. Do you remember? Yeah, and what's the main thing we do to get free from samsara? In the middle scope, you don't remember? There's the 3 higher trainings, the description of the 3 higher trainings. That's how we get free from samsara. We engage in the 3 higher trainings, which are the higher training of morality, right? Not harming others. And then, so thereby the mind becomes peaceful. And on that basis, we practice the higher training of concentration, right? Where we learn to focus our minds, which, yeah. And then on the basis of that, generating good concentration, we generate the higher training of wisdom, right? So that's where emptiness comes. The higher training of wisdom in the middle scope is also a wisdom realizing emptiness. So it comes up in the middle scope as a way to be free from the suffering of samsara. We practice the higher training of wisdom. And then, because we don't have much time left, I'll just give you the answer for the. So in the great scope, right? The great scope first is bodhicitta, the motivation, the mind of bodhicitta, aspiring to achieve full enlightenment. And then the practices, having generated bodhicitta, what do we do to achieve enlightenment? We engage in the practice of the 6 perfections. And then the third is the 4, I think that's the 4 ways of gathering disciples. That's the last main topic. But in the 6 perfections, that's the main, bodhicitta and the 6 perfections are the main topics for the great scope. Then yeah, there's like I said earlier, right? There's the perfections of the first is generosity, then morality, then patience, then joy sever, concentration, and the 6th is the wisdom. So it's said that of the 6 perfections, the first 5 are for the point of generating the 6th. They're all like causes to generate the 6th. So the main one is the perfection of wisdom. So that, of course, is about emptiness. So it's in the middle scope, in the what is it, higher training in wisdom, and in the great scope in the perfection of wisdom. So where emptiness comes out in the long run. Okay, so just before we stop, we'll just dedicate, but I want to just look at the readings for this week I gave. So again, I'll send out this PowerPoint and the outlines, the Word document that has the outlines for this week, which is what I've presented in the PowerPoint. But the readings, so from the required readings for this module, I've put these for, related to this session this week. So the main one is Liberation in the Palm of Your Hand. Yeah, the pages are marked there. And Mary Ellen sent out in an email with the page numbers for the blue edition also. And then in the PDF, there's a PDF file of readings. Then there's these first 2 very short ones by Demolotra Rinpoche, and then one longer one by Lama Zopa Rinpoche. So that relates very much to what we did this week and what we'll do in the next 2 weeks, Seeking the Eye. And then these are these 2 books that I think you have to get separately, Virtue and Reality. And the first 46 pages here, it does not really to do with emptiness. It's more to do with bodhicitta and kind of introductory things. So if you can just skim through that, it's good. And then in the Heart Sutra, I don't recall exactly, but I think it's also introductory things at the beginning, not really about emptiness. So that's what there is for this week. Okay, so let's just dedicate briefly. So think of whatever merit we've created by beginning to think about, discuss, meditate on emptiness and dependent arising, as taught by Shakyamuni Buddha, and rejoice in whatever merit we've created. And then bring to mind any prayers you'd like to make. So may all of your prayers be accomplished in accordance with your virtuous aspirations. And then may all, in short, may all sentient beings be free from every form of suffering and have every form of well-being and happiness up to full enlightenment. And may all of our own actions be only a cause for this. And may all authentic and wholesome, beneficial spiritual teachings spread. And may there be people who fully realize and explain those teachings. And may all of our own teachers, in His Holiness Dalai Lama, Lama Zopa Rinpoche, and others, have long and stable lives. Okay, thank you all, and see you next week.
Thank you, Venerable.
Thank you so much.
Venerable, thanks, Mary Ellen.
Thank you, Venerable.
Venerable Palmo.
Thank you, Venerable and Mary Ellen and Ers.
Thank you, Mary.